The atmosphere on Carminar was thick with mineral dust and arrogance. To the untrained eye, the planet shimmered with natural beauty. Crimson cliffs under a teal sky, shimmering salt rivers winding through petrified forests. But to the seasoned eye, it was just another conquered rock in a long galactic list. The bandits had taken it 6 weeks ago, looting trade convoys, enslaving the mining caste, and declaring it their new free empire. They expected retaliation from someone. They just hadn't expected her. A sleek, obsidian shuttle descended like a whisper into the makeshift war camp outside the capital ruins. It bore no weapons, no escort, just a white diplomatic crest from Earth's Terran Accord, glinting like a smirk in the sun. The gang of galactic warlords, pirates, raiders, ex-generals, and self-styled emperors gathered to watch. They leaned on railings, laughed in 6 different dialects, and took bets on what species would crawl out. Then the shuttle hissed open, and a single human woman stepped out. Mid-40s, neat brown suit, no armor, no translator drone. She adjusted her jacket like she was entering a Sunday brunch, not a battlefield. One gloved hand lifted in a casual wave. "Good morning, gentlemen," she said, smiling. "I brought tea." Laughter broke out across the terrace. One fungal beast spat sap in amusement. A scaled chieftain slapped his own thigh. A cybernetic mantis clicked its blades in approval. Behind her, another figure stepped onto the gangplank. A large man, broad, silent. He wore no insignia. His hair was dark with silver at the temples, cropped close to his skull. He didn't speak, didn't look at the warlords. He stood like a shadow with muscle. The woman stepped onto the platform where the warlords had gathered, plush cushions, spilled alcohol, and a scorched banner that once belonged to the planetary senate. She took it all in like she just walked into a slightly messy parlor. "I assume one of you is the spokesperson for this, Liberty Alliance." A heavy-footed beast with crusted horns and a gut like a graph tank rose. "I am Lord Kadron, sovereign of Carminar, hammer of the fringe worlds, and prime architect of the bandit confederacy." She extended a hand like they were at a business mixer. "Ruth Madison, Earth's envoy for contested territories and accidental empires." Kadron blinked at the hand, then took it, hesitantly. Her grip was firm but warm. He looked momentarily disarmed. "You came here to negotiate," he sneered. "I came here because your little playdate is causing traffic congestion on 3 major trade routes. Our merchants are very distressed." She gave him a mild smile. "And when humans get distressed, it gets interesting." Another alien, a 3-eyed, eel-skinned tactician named Quor, slithered forward. "You sent 1 ship, 1 diplomat, 1 bodyguard. Is this a joke or just stupidity?" "Well," Ruth said, tilting her head thoughtfully, "those aren't mutually exclusive, are they?" A pause. Then more laughter. One of the younger warlords clapped. "She's funny. Soft but funny." Ruth walked past them, examining a table strewn with captured communications tech. She tapped the edge of one device, frowning slightly. "You've been pirating supply lines, jamming rescue calls, and threatening nearby neutral colonies," she said. "All of that's against Galactic Accords. But more importantly, it's incredibly rude." "Rude?" Kadron chortled. "You think you can police this sector with politeness?" "Oh, I'm not here to police it," Ruth said, turning to face them. "I'm here to offer you a way out." Quor laughed again, harsher this time. "What, you expect us to give up the richest planet in the system just because you asked nicely?" "No," she said cheerfully. "I expect you won't." Behind her, the silent man adjusted his stance, only slightly. It was enough. One of the guards flinched without knowing why. Ruth folded her hands. "You see, humans have this peculiar habit. We arrive last. We come underdressed. We smile too much. And everyone assumes we're harmless." The warlords leaned in. She had their attention now. Her voice didn't change, but the space between her words grew taut. "But history has this nasty habit of remembering us as problem solvers. Ugly, stubborn, and statistically inconvenient to underestimate." "You're bluffing," Kadron grunted. "I never bluff. I lie with style. Entirely different thing." The mantis warrior clicked his mandibles. "You're alone." "I'm never alone," Ruth said calmly. "That's the first rule of Earth diplomacy. Always bring something to the party. Food, wine, or a walking extinction event." The man beside her finally stepped forward. He said nothing, but there was a subtle shift in the air, like the temperature dropped, like instincts thousands of generations deep stirred in the alien guts. "Who is he?" Quor asked. She smiled. "His name doesn't matter. What matters is what he represents. And that's inconvenient for you." The fungus leader, Raxthul, gurgled. "You're trying to scare us." "No," Ruth replied, voice still warm. "I'm trying to save time. I don't like cleaning up messes. You see, I'm a diplomat. I solve problems with words. But him? He solves problems with silence." Kadran took a step forward. "You're threatening us, little mammal?" "I'm suggesting a change in trajectory. One that doesn't end with your heads mounted in a quiet government bunker back home." The silence that followed had weight. She walked to the edge of the platform and looked out across the valley, where her shuttle still gleamed under the dual suns. Her back was to them. "You have exactly one opportunity to surrender peacefully," she said. "Refuse and well." The sound of a dropped weapon clattered behind her. One of the younger guards had backed into a shadow and discovered that the shadow moved. The Alpha Wolf, as he would later be called, appeared behind him without a sound. No raised weapon, no aggression, just the unbearable presence of something older than tactics and colder than fear. Ruth didn't turn around. "I brought tea," she said again. "But he doesn't drink." The guard ran. No one stopped him. The mantis took a cautious step backward. "Is he enhanced?" "No," she said. "He's just very practiced." Quor sneered. "He's still one man." "True," Ruth said. "But then, so is your last warlord. You know." Before he vanished. That made Quor hesitate. Kadran growled. "You can't possibly think we'll just walk away. You humans don't even have fleets out here." "No," Ruth said, turning finally. "But we have long memories. And long hands." The Alpha Wolf's eyes never blinked. He stood like a monument to some ancient terror, quiet and coiled. The aliens could feel it, the offness. The Predator's stillness. The way he seemed to know the layout of the room better than they did. Kadran gestured sharply. "Arrest them." 2 guards moved, then dropped. No movement from the Alpha Wolf. No noise. But the guards hit the ground unconscious. Ruth didn't flinch. She poured herself tea from a flask at her belt. "I keep telling people," she murmured, "humans aren't civilized. We're just domesticated. Temporarily." The warlords stood frozen. "Consider this your final offer," she said, sipping. "Leave Carminar. Cease operations. Return your captives. And we'll pretend this was just a misunderstanding. And if we don't," she smiled. A bright, gentle, utterly terrifying smile. "Then I let him take off the leash." Something about that phrase made the air thinner. Even the fungi stopped breathing. One of the avian warlords quietly excused himself and vomited over the balcony. Quor, shaking slightly, hissed, "Why go through the trouble? Why not just destroy us?" "Because," Ruth said gently, "we're still trying to be better." And there it was. The truth under every line of pleasant diplomacy, every rehearsed speech and friendly tone. A deep, terrible well of patience. The kind that waits years to strike. The kind that lets others gloat just to see who they really are. She tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "I'll give you until sundown." Kadran barked, "We don't fear humans." Ruth raised an eyebrow. "You should." And then, just once, the Alpha Wolf moved. One smooth step forward. No threat. No violence. But every alien in the room took a step back. Ruth set her cup down. It clicked gently against the table. "I do hope you'll make the right choice," she said. "But we're prepared if you don't." The bandits stood silent. For the first time since their conquest, no one laughed. Ruth turned and walked back toward her shuttle, the Alpha Wolf trailing behind her, a silent guardian of something far older than civilization. The offer had been made. Sundown would bring their answer. Under the flickering twin suns of Carminar, silence fell like a noose. The warlords returned to their compound with forced bravado, But something lingered in the air, an unfamiliar itch behind the eyes, a sense that something had changed, that they had missed something crucial, that perhaps, just perhaps, the polite little human woman hadn't been bluffing. By midday, they were snapping at each other in the command tent. "She's alone," Kadran snarled, slamming a clawed fist onto the table. "One diplomat. One soldier. We are not children frightened by bedtime tales." "She didn't flinch when you threatened her," Kor hissed, coiling nervously. "That's not training. That's indifference." "She's bluffing," Raxthul gurgled, his fungal tendrils pulsing with stress hormones. "It's theater. Humans do theater. That's all they are, talk and trickery." They turned to the hologram projector, watching looped footage from earlier. The Alpha Wolf, as some already whispered him, was seen barely moving, and yet 2 trained guards had collapsed at his feet without so much as a sound. "Maybe," muttered the Mantis, "we should leave." Kadran roared. "Cowards." "No," said a voice quietly. "Not cowards." They turned. It was the youngest among them, a soft-spoken avian tactician with wide eyes and a scholar's soul. He tapped his claw against the table. "I studied human history. Back in the academy. Before I defected." Kadran growled. "Then you wasted your education." The avian didn't flinch. "You don't understand. These people, they make war like they make poetry. Precise. Cruel. Beautiful in its own way. They don't fight to win. They fight to end things." The room fell silent again. Even Kadran didn't argue this time. At the far edge of the encampment, Dane Voss knelt beneath a broken tree. He wasn't watching the warlords. He was watching the terrain. To most, the jungle looked wild and chaotic, but to Voss it was a language. Every bend of grass, every shattered twig told him something. He listened with his eyes, reading movement and absence alike. 5 mercenaries were creeping up the ridge line. One amateur's breath fogged too early. Another stepped on a brittle root. They thought they were the hunters. They were wrong. Voss rose. Slow. Calm. He did not need a weapon. Not yet. He moved like a shadow cast by the past. The mercs reached the ridge and paused. Then the screaming started. It lasted less than 30 seconds. And when it stopped, there was nothing but the wind. Ruth was seated inside the shuttle, sipping tea from a tin cup. She didn't look up as Voss re-entered, blood on his collar, his knuckles raw. "How many?" she asked. 5. Paid muscle. "Anyone watch you?" "No." She nodded, sipping. "They'll try again. They're scared now." He said nothing. Ruth watched him a moment longer. "You good?" "I don't sleep much," he replied. "That's not what I asked." He met her eyes. "Good enough." She exhaled softly. "That'll do." Hours passed. The bandit compound grew twitchy. Patrols doubled. Sentinels deployed high-sensitivity motion scanners. Rumors ran wild. One said the Alpha Wolf could vanish into dust. Another that he spoke death into existence. Someone even claimed to have found an entire patrol flayed, though no body was actually seen. Paranoia spread faster than fact. And while the warlords argued and fortified, Voss moved. Not loud. Not with drama. Just presence. Measured. Methodical. At night, he dismantled their exterior sensor grids. By morning, their water purification system failed. By dusk, 3 officers were missing. Ruth remained in her shuttle, serene. She sent no further messages, offered no updates. She simply waited, calm as still water. Inside the compound, Kadran paced like a caged beast. His generals were beginning to ask uncomfortable questions. His chain of command frayed at the edges. None of them could explain how their best scouts had vanished. None could say how the humans always seemed one step ahead. He summoned Ruth to a second meeting, this time under a tent guarded by every weapon they owned. She arrived late, alone. Again, they scanned her for weapons. She had none. Still, she smiled. "I brought sugar cubes this time," she said, holding up a tiny tin. "Thought we might sweeten the mood." Kadran slammed his fist on the table. "What do you want from us?" Ruth tilted her head. "That depends." "What do you want?" He growled. "We want what we've taken. Territory. Tribute. respect. And you thought you'd get all that from attacking mining convoys and enslaving neutral colonists, she asked. Very ambitious. He pointed a claw at her. You think you can scare us with shadows and stories. I don't need to scare you, Lord Cadron. You've already done that to yourselves. You killed our men. No, she said evenly. He did. You're responsible. I'm a diplomat, she said, smiling. I don't make people disappear. I merely provide the opportunity. He hissed. You're monsters. She leaned forward. Look around, she said softly. You invaded a peaceful world, slaughtered its leaders, sold its children, and now you're afraid of a man who hasn't said a single word to you. Ask yourself, who's the real monster in this story? He had no answer. She stood, brushing invisible dust from her sleeves. The clock's ticking, my lord, she said. Sundown's nearly here. As she left, a lieutenant leaned toward Cadron. She's bluffing. She has to be. Cadron didn't answer. His eyes were fixed on the place where she had stood. Back in the jungle, Dane Voss crouched over another comms relay. He'd disabled 5 so far. This one was different, older, tied into their long-range beacon. He studied it, fingers dancing across ancient wiring. Old habits came back fast. He was 12 again in a training facility buried beneath Alaska. They'd handed him a combat knife and dropped him in snow with nothing but coordinates. He'd walked 70 miles before the wolves found him. He'd walked another 10 with a broken ankle, dragging the kill behind him. By 17, he could survive on any planet in the Terran Accord's reach. By 21, he'd been sent into ghost wars and silent conflicts where he wasn't supposed to exist. And now he was here, still walking, still hunting. He planted a spike into the relay, uploaded a virus designed to cascade and self-replicate. No one noticed. They were too busy counting their fears. Ruth received the signal an hour later. She didn't smile. She simply whispered, "Thank you," and deleted the message. As the sun dipped toward the horizon, the warlords assembled in the central hall. Armed, armored. Every merc, every drone, every mine activated. Ruth arrived once more, her hands empty. Voss did not follow. Cadron glared at her. "Where is he?" "Nearby," she said. "You said sundown," Kor said. "We're here. Make your terms." "I already made them." "We will not leave." "Then you'll die," she said, sipping tea from her belt flask. "But you'll do it politely." The lights flickered. The air changed. Screams echoed from the east corridor. Then the west. Gunfire snapped, then silenced. Cadron looked at his screens. Static. "What is this?" Ruth leaned forward. "This is humanity." In rapid succession, their defenses fell. Doors locked from inside. Oxygen pumped with anesthetics. Comms dead. External drones self-destructed. Every countermeasure had been logged, studied, and reversed. And then Voss stepped into the hall. Blood stained his sleeves. One of the guards aimed a plasma rifle. He never fired. Voss was already there. The guard collapsed, windpipe crushed. Another tried to run. Voss caught him mid-step, twisted, disarmed, dropped him. 3 warlords drew weapons. They fired. They missed. He did not. The hall descended into chaos. Ruth calmly walked through it, untouched. She spoke to Cadron as he backed away, breathless. "You thought we came for negotiations. We didn't. We came to deliver the bill." Voss took down another guard. A brutal elbow. A silent drop. Kor fled. Voss didn't chase. Ruth did. She found Kor at the escape bay, punching in override codes. He looked up, shaking. "Why?" She shrugged. "Because you broke the rules." And then mocked the ones who follow them. "I'll give you anything. Credits. Ships. I don't need anything from you." He lunged. She stepped aside. Voss was already there. Kor never touched the ground again. Outside, the suns dipped fully below the horizon. And with them, the warlord's reign ended. By midnight, Carminar was quiet again. No screams. No laughter. Just the wind. Ruth sat on a rock beside the central plaza, staring at the alien stars. Voss stood nearby, eyes scanning the tree line, though he knew no threat remained. She looked at him. "You all right?" He said nothing for a long time. Then, softly, "I remember the snow." She didn't press. She just nodded. "Thank you," she said. He didn't respond. He didn't need to. Behind them, lights from orbit flickered on. The fleet was arriving. Terran ships. Sleek. Dark. Silent. They would collect the prisoners, catalog the evidence, seal the compound. And then they would leave. Another day, another lie of peace maintained. Ruth rose, dusting off her trousers. "You sure you don't want tea?" He looked at her. And for the first time since landing, he smiled. A brief, exhausted thing. "I'll try it." She poured a cup and handed it over. He took it. Didn't drink. Just held it. Sometimes warmth was enough. They stood there, side by side, as the stars shifted and the galaxy turned. Two humans in a world that didn't understand what had just happened. Only that something old had awakened. Something polite, patient, and terribly, terribly precise. The kind of thing you should never laugh at. Not twice. They found Kadran in the command spire, staring blankly at a dead console. Around him, the once glorious war room was cracked and bleeding sparks. The screens were black. The table maps flickered with the last traces of resistance before static overtook all. He did not hear the soft-footed approach behind him. He did not move until Ruth Madison's voice interrupted the hum of his fraying authority. Still waiting for reinforcements? His head turned slowly. His eyes, bloodshot and shaking, found her standing calmly in the archway. Her coat was dusty. Her gloves were clean. Kadran's voice came rough and small. "What are you?" She gave him a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "I'm what happens when no one listens." He tried to rise, stumbled, and fell back into his chair. There was no throne now, just a bent frame in the shadow of a human woman who hadn't once raised her voice. Ruth stepped inside and set a small metal case on the table between them. The latch clicked open. A datapad inside glowed with the Terran Accord seal. "You're going to sign this," she said, sitting. He stared at it. "A confession?" "A transmission," she corrected. "To the Galactic Council, declaring your immediate withdrawal, responsibility for the attacks, and full reparations to the settlers of Karmanar." Kadran scoffed, half choked on his own bitterness. "They'll never believe I wrote it under my own will." "They won't have to." She slid another data chip across the table. "This contains the logs from your ship, intercepted orders, routed convoys, proof of slavery networks. You'll say it was greed, hubris. You'll say the humans arrived peacefully, and you folded like a wet napkin. They'll know it's a lie." "Yes," she said, "but it's a lie they'll want to believe." He stared at the datapad. "Why not kill me?" Ruth looked genuinely puzzled. "Because that's not the point. Your death would mean nothing. But your surrender? Your cowardice, that will echo." He flinched. Some part of him still believed in honor. Most warlords did. They wore their cruelty like armor, but underneath it, they were built on stories of strength, legacy, conquest. Ruth didn't break his body. She broke the myth of him. He signed. She waited. When it was done, she stood and slipped the pad back into its case. "I suppose this means I'm late for tea," she said with a sigh. "You've won," he muttered. "Why does it feel like I've handed the galaxy a blade?" She tilted her head at him. "Because you have." Outside, the orbital fleet was already processing the prisoners. Human ships, sleek, black, unbranded, dropped cloaked drones onto every major site of the bandit network. Cleanup had begun before the warlords even realized they'd lost. Dane Voss stood atop the cliffs overlooking the main valley, arms crossed, wind raking through his short hair. His eyes tracked the drones silently. Below, in the ruins of the capital, Terran Accord medics moved through the rubble, locating survivors and cataloging tech. No one spoke much. Voss preferred it that way. He heard Ruth before she reached him. She never stomped, never called out. She just arrived, like inevitability. She stood beside him without asking. "It's done," she said. He nodded. Kadran signed. "Council gets its headline. We get our leverage." Still, he said nothing. Ruth exhaled, watching the light shift. The second sun was dipping low, spilling orange and deep violet over the horizon. Funny, she said softly. They always expect us to bring fire and fury. Never paperwork. Voss gave the faintest smirk. You think the council will play along? He asked at last. Oh, they'll clutch their pearls, issue statements, condemn unauthorized action, she said, her voice light. Then they'll quietly thank us for cleaning up their problem. They'll forget. Of course. Then it happens again. She looked at him. No, she said. Because this time they'll remember the smile. He met her gaze. Yours. She shook her head. Yours. Voss looked away, but not before she caught the flicker of something in his eyes. Weariness, maybe. Or the shape of a man who had spent too long in the shadows, unsure if he still belonged in the sun. She didn't press it. Instead, she handed him a small device, bare bones, old-style analog. A gift, she said. He raised an eyebrow. Play it, she added. He pressed the switch. Music crackled to life. Earth music. A scratchy vinyl recording of jazz trumpet under starlight. Something slow. Human. He listened for a moment, then pocketed it. Thank you, he said. They stood in silence again. Above them, one of the Terran cruisers decloaked, revealing its full form for the first time. The shape of it was elegant, lethal. An arrow in the sky, silent but undeniably present. Ruth gestured toward it. That's the Artemis. She's been waiting for our signal for 3 days. Hidden behind the moon, watching everything. Voss nodded. Good choice. She doesn't have many guns, Ruth said. But she has a lot of eyes. He glanced at her. That a metaphor? No, she said. I just like my metaphors honest. He gave a quiet laugh, dry but real. Below, a siren went off, low, non-lethal. A confirmation ping. All bandit transmissions shut down. Human control confirmed. She checked her wrist pad. And that's the official end of the so-called Confederacy. Just like that. Ruth smiled. No, not just like that. Took 3 months of setup, 5 months of intelligence gathering, 1 saboteur inside their cargo lines, and you. Voss said nothing. She looked at him, softer now. They tell stories about monsters, she said. But most of them don't smile. I don't smile, he replied. You do, she said. Only when it matters. He looked away again. The wind tugged gently at his coat. Do you ever think it's too much? He asked. The pretending. The masks. The puppets we become. She thought a moment. No, she said honestly. I think it's just enough. Just enough to make them pause before they act again. Just enough to give someone a second of fear before they do something unforgivable. He nodded. A slow agreement. She turned toward the descending shuttles. A dozen new envoys were arriving. Rebuilders. Negotiators. Aid crews. The cleanup team. Time to vanish again, Ruth said. We've done the ugly part. Voss didn't move. She touched his shoulder, lightly, briefly. You were the right choice, she said. Doesn't feel like a victory, he muttered. It's not, she agreed. It's just balance. He stayed behind as she walked away. Not to sulk. Not to be dramatic. But because silence had always been his ally. Words were hers. Action was his. Together, they had reminded the galaxy that humanity wasn't to be mocked. And this time, they hadn't done it with bombs or battleships. They'd done it with a single man. And a woman who smiled when she meant it least. In the war room, later that evening, Ruth drafted her report. She included no embellishments, no praise. Just facts. Clean. Sharp. She ended it with a single note. We offered peace. They chose memory. As she uploaded the file, a message pinged across her screen. From the council. Sanction notice. Formal reprimand. No support authorized. She read it once. Smiled. Then forwarded it to Voss. He read it. Then deleted it. Neither of them responded. They didn't need permission to protect what mattered. Not anymore. At the edge of the valley, as dusk surrendered to star-salted black, Voss watched the sky open above him. The quiet hum of human ships cut across the atmosphere. The shape of order returning. He looked down at his hands. Still blood under the nails. still the echo of movement in his bones. He thought about Kadran, broken and blinking in that chair. Not dead, just dismantled. He didn't feel pride. He didn't feel regret. He felt steady. The monster they whispered about hadn't roared. It had smiled. And that, Voss thought, was enough. Behind him, lights flickered on inside the camp. Below Earth's banner, just a white circle around a blue-green star, was hoisted above the command tower. The wind caught it. It fluttered softly, like a warning whispered to a sleeping galaxy. Don't. Not again. Above the bruised horizon of Karmanar, the stars sharpened like blades. The skies that once hung heavy with the scent of conquest now echoed with a silent procession of Terran warships. No fanfare, no thunder, just the slow, clinical descent of judgment. Clean, unavoidable, like frost. The fleet did not broadcast arrival codes. It did not request permission to land. It simply was present, precise, and utterly disinterested in theater. These were not ships sent to conquer. They were sent to remember, and to ensure others would, too. In the shadow of the orbiting dreadnought Artemis, Ruth Madison stood at the edge of the command plaza, watching the transfer of prisoners. Warlords, mercenaries, and lieutenants, all bound and subdued, now stripped of banners and bravado. She watched them loaded into sterile, reinforced transports, each one a fallen symbol, each one a piece of a fractured empire. She didn't speak. Not yet. There would be enough of that soon. Dane Voss emerged from the medical bay behind her, the bruises on his knuckles freshly wrapped. He carried himself like a man who had just walked through a storm and wasn't sure if it had ended or merely shifted skies. "They're stalling the uplink," he said. She didn't look at him. "Let them. They'll beg for terms soon. They won't get them." He stood beside her, silent for a moment. "You ever think we're the bad guys?" he asked softly. Ruth blinked once, then turned to face him. No, he didn't push. He rarely did. But the question lingered. A transmission pinged across the surface of the plaza, a wide-range call from the Galactic Council. The same council that had refused to interfere, that had declined repeated petitions, that had labeled Earth's advance team excessively reactive. Now they wanted a conversation. Ruth accepted the feed. The hologram flared to life in front of her, conjuring a half-circle of alien faces, senators, delegates, monarchs in ceremonial collars. They looked tired, nervous. Behind their eyes was fear, dressed in formality. A Saran ambassador, tall and crystalline, opened the dialogue. "Envoy Madison, we've received reports. There's concern over Earth's actions." "I'm sure there is," she said, adjusting her cuffs. Concern is a lovely word. Vague, gentle, cowardly. You deployed an unauthorized fleet. We cleaned up your problem. You eliminated a ruling body of a semi-recognized sector. Without vote, without approval. Ruth didn't blink. "We asked for approval. You sent condolences." Another delegate, this one reptilian and coiled, hissed. "You've acted with aggression, unbecoming a peacekeeping member state." She stepped closer to the projection. Her voice did not rise. It never needed to. "We acted with precision. You mistake politeness for obedience. You mistake restraint for reluctance. What you fail to grasp is that humans are not bound by your fear of escalation. We are the escalation." The Saran narrowed its eyes. "Are you threatening the council?" "No," Ruth said, smiling faintly. "I'm reminding you what happens when the ones you mock decide to stop talking." There was silence on the line, deep, fragile. Then the Saran spoke again, carefully. "We will require oversight. Sanctions may follow." "Of course," she said lightly. "Sanction away. Draft reports. Form committees. Just know that if you hesitate again, we won't." The feed blinked out. Ruth exhaled slowly, rolled her neck once, then turned away from the silent column of light. Her hand shook, but only slightly. The pressure was never visible. She never allowed it to be. Voss watched her quietly. "Do you think they'll retaliate?" he asked. "No," she said. "They'll rewrite the narrative, so they don't look small." "Are we small?" She looked up at the vast ships above, at the planet broken beneath them, and thought of Earth, still distant, still flawed, still trying. "No," she said. "We're just far more capable than they'd like to admit." A soft whine of turbines marked the approach of the final transport. This one held not prisoners, but data, files, logs, proof of atrocity, names, coordinates, receipts of blood. It would be broadcast across the neutral systems within the hour. Ruth stepped toward the console, ready to activate the uplink. She paused. "What is it?" Voss asked. She turned toward him, her eyes shadowed by more than just fatigue. "They'll frame this as aggression. You know that. Earth, the brute. Earth, the uncaged animal." "We are the uncaged animal," Voss said, not with pride, but fact. "Yes," she admitted. "But I wanted to be the shepherd." "You're not." She sighed. "No. I'm the wolf who remembered she used to wear wool." The wind shifted. The night deepened. A chill ran across the compound, one born not from weather, but from consequence. Far above them, new ships blinked into orbit, observers, journalists, curious powers who had remained quiet while the bandits ruled, now eager to see what Earth would do next. Ruth activated the broadcast. A calm voice filled the comm channels. "This is Envoy Ruth Madison of the Terran Accord. Carminar has been liberated. The occupying forces were removed by targeted operations conducted under Earth authority. Full evidence of criminal acts by the previous regime is now public. The Accord accepts all inquiries, and it recommends none." She cut the line. It was done. Voss leaned against the nearest wall. "You just declared humanity a galactic problem." "No," she corrected. "I reminded them we've always been one." In the days that followed, the Council issued its statements, measured, mournful, and utterly spineless. They condemned the lawlessness of the bandits, mourned the lives lost, and expressed concern over Earth's independent actions. They requested dialogue. They begged for nuance. But they didn't come. Not to Earth. Not to Carminar. They stayed very, very quiet. On the third day, a ship bearing an independent flag arrived, a trade envoy from a mid-tier planet that had once banned human entry. They landed without incident, requested an audience, and offered formal congratulations. Ruth met them with tea. She poured each cup carefully, silently, as they stumbled over awkward praise. She accepted their platitudes with a smile. And when they asked if Earth was planning to secure the system, she simply said, "Security is only necessary when people forget the rules." And then she asked about their cargo manifests, what goods they carried, what treaties they hoped to form. They talked numbers and commerce, and all the while, she wore the expression of someone who had never hurt anyone in her life. The diplomats left reassured. They never saw Voss, watching from the shadows, one hand resting on the blade tucked inside his coat. He never spoke. He rarely needed to. The story spread faster than any press release. About the man who hunted monsters without words. About the woman who smiled like mercy and moved like inevitability. About the planet that once mocked humanity and became a cautionary tale etched into the memory of every sentient race that thought Earth was still learning the rules. They weren't learning. They were waiting. And now the wait was over. Months later, a new delegation approached Earth's orbit. Not as commanders, as supplicants. They arrived in ships decorated in peace sigils, requesting conversation. Ruth welcomed them. She served tea. And in a quiet room lit by Earth's soft, blue glow, she reminded them, gently, calmly, that the worst mistake one could make was to believe the monsters had been slain. Some monsters wore chains. Others wore suits. And some, the cleverest ones, learned to speak softly enough to be invited in. They asked her what Earth wanted. She replied, "Nothing." They asked her what Earth would do if pressed. She only smiled. No threats. No declarations. Just a smile. A smile they would remember. A smile the galaxy would whisper about. Because somewhere out there, among the stars and the diplomats and the politicians who still played their games, a reckoning had arrived wearing a polite face. And behind that face, always, walked the wolf.